President Biden is laying out ideas he hopes will level the playing field in the U.S. economy. In a speech promoting his spending plans, he went after the wealthy and corporations, saying they do not pay their fair share of taxes. He says for too long, the economy has left out working Americans.
How is it possible that 55 of the largest corporations in this country paid $0 in federal income taxes? They made over $40 billion in the year 2020, and they paid zero. How is it possible for millionaires and billionaires that can pay a lower rate of tax than teachers, firefighters, or law enforcement officers? This is our moment to deal working people back into the economy.
President Biden also called out Republican governors for opposing vaccine mandates for companies, adding that public health measures are essential to getting the economy back on track. 240 days into his term, President Biden's average approval rating is lower than most of his recent predecessors at the same point. According to 538's weighted average, President Biden's stands at 46% approval. He was above 50% midway through last month. Almost every president going back through Jimmy Carter was above that point 240 days in. Former President Donald Trump is the exception. His approval rating sat under 39% at the same point in his presidency. One area where the public has generally agreed with the president is his handling of the pandemic. According to 538, 51% currently approve of his response to COVID-19. The White House has been aiming to roll out vaccine booster shots to the public as soon as next week, but new FDA findings are raising questions about the need for them. Scientists expressed skepticism that diminished protection from the shots actually means they are less effective. Here's how White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki responded.
Our objective is to be prepared should all of this process move forward. It's always been pending the approval of the ACIP and the FDA. All of these doctors have said this could be needed. They've said in their statement, 8 of them said they had determined boosters would be needed. Now it's going to go through the process. That's what's happening over the next week. So we're not going to predetermine what that process is going to say.
This morning, temporary security fencing went up around the U.S. Capitol in preparation for this weekend's rally by supporters of former President Trump and those arrested during the Capitol riot. Intelligence suggests there will not be significant violence, but law enforcement officials tell CBS News they are concerned about potential lone wolf actors. Though the former president does not have any public affiliation with Saturday's demonstration, he released a statement this afternoon saying, quote, "Our hearts and minds are with the people being persecuted so unfairly relating to the January 6th protest concerning the rigged presidential election." For more, let's bring in Nancy Cortez, Sarah Mucha, and Rhonda Colvin. Nancy is CBS News chief White House correspondent. Sarah is a political reporter for Axios, and Rhonda is a Capitol Hill reporter for the Washington Post. Welcome to all of you. Nancy, let me start with you. Did President Biden announce anything new today in his economic speech?
Hey, Elaine, he did not. What he was mostly trying to accomplish today was to build support for the policies that he has already proposed, because we're really at an inflection point right now. Democrats have just about finished crafting this massive multi-trillion-dollar bill that is filled with a whole bunch of his biggest priorities, social spending on everything from education to health care to elder care. And he needs to get not just the public on board, but he needs to get some of his own Democrats in Congress on board, Democrats who might be concerned about the price tag. So what he was making the case for today was not just what's in that bill and the big infrastructure bill that they're trying to put side by side, but also the ways that he and other Democrats want to pay for all that spending. Raising taxes is not something that's ever comfortable or all that popular, particularly if you're someone who might face the tax hikes. But what he was arguing in the speech is that wealthy people and corporations can afford to pay more and, in fact, have not been paying their fair share for years. He was making an argument to try to reach the American people, try to reach Republicans, and try to reach some of those very crucial holdout Democrats.
Well, Rhonda, October is just around the corner. Lawmakers have 2 weeks left to reach a compromise on federal spending and increase the government's borrowing limit. What became of Treasury Secretary Yellen's call with Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell yesterday?
Well, we learned that the two had a discussion about this, and basically the minority leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, said that he and other GOP members of his caucus are not going to vote on any increase to the debt limit. He said Democrats can go on it alone, and suggesting that they can use all the procedural tools they have at their disposal, namely reconciliation, which is something that $3.5 trillion package is going to, if it is passed, would be passed through that avenue. So he's saying they could use that. But he, as the lead spokesperson, as the person who is most influential with the Senate GOP, he says they will not take this up from their point of view and will not vote on it. And over at the House, Nancy Pelosi has said that she does not believe Democrats will tack this onto that $3.5 trillion reconciliation package. So it remains to be seen how they will handle this debt limit crisis. But Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, has been telling Congress for weeks now that this has to be done. It will create economic crisis if it isn't done. It could be, in her words, catastrophic if it isn't handled. And these debts that the Treasury Department needs to handle are directly related to operating the federal government. So this is a dire warning that the Secretary of Treasury has told Congress. So we'll be watching in the weeks ahead to see what happens next.
All right. Well, Sarah, President Biden is working to gain support from moderate Senators Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin for his spending plan. Do we know more about his meeting with them yesterday?
Yeah, well, it cannot be overstated, of course, how key moderates are in this negotiation. I think, in the duration of all of these infrastructure negotiations on this program, I've talked about Joe Manchin at least a dozen times. And that's because there's no room for error in the Senate. And in the House, even there's only 3 votes where they have a margin for Democrats to defect. So that being said, Senator Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema met with the president after they have said out loud that the $3.5 trillion price tag of the reconciliation bill is too high. And even going more granular, Manchin and Sinema don't necessarily agree on which programs or tax increases that they can stomach. Senator Joe Manchin said recently that a tax hike on corporations over 25% is too high. And that's a really conservative view. Even Gary Cohn, who's President Trump's economic advisor, said that he would be on board with a tax hike on corporations that was over 25%. So there's definitely still room that we're watching Senators Manchin and Sinema see where they land. But at the same time, we can't forget progressives, right? This is a very, very tight margin that both the Senate and House have to negotiate. And progressives are saying that even they're compromising already on that $3.5 trillion price tag, that it's too low for them. They wanted $6 trillion, which realistically no one was ever going to go for. But this is, I was talking to a former senior aide to Nancy Pelosi last week, and she mentioned there's always been factions between progressives and Democrats and new members and old members. But this is really sort of the first time we've seen such a tight margin. And when they're counting on every single vote, it's really important to see, where they're going to land on those taxes specifically.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, how much room for negotiation there really can be in a situation like that, where, as you say, you're trying to really navigate between these two very different groups with different views on the spending. All right, well, Rhonda, analysis from Reuters finds the top 10 states benefiting from President Biden's expanded child tax credit this past August were all states that voted for President Trump in 2020. Now, most are headed by Republican governors, yet not one Republican voted for it. What does the fight look like to potentially extend it another year?
Well, if the residents of those states and the people have their way, make their voices heard, it could be that Republicans in Congress would be somewhat pushed in a corner to support that. You're kind of seeing that play out in all sorts of different ways in our politics right now, where the public sentiment doesn't match up with the legislative agenda of Republicans right now. So that is a great example right now of sort of that political battle that's playing out, where these kitchen table issues that interest so many Americans are not being supported on the Hill by their representatives or their senators. So that's something that might turn into one of these 2022 midterm issues as well, is when you have the electorate, you have the population saying one thing and saying that they have benefited from either tax breaks or any sort of other financial agendas from the Biden White House. That may result in some of those vulnerable districts, congressional districts, to have really interesting midterm elections and closely watch midterm elections to see if some seats flip based on how their electorate is feeling.
All right, we are switching gears. Nancy, we have seen the White House in recent weeks team up with celebrities like the singer Olivia Rodrigo to help promote vaccines. Now they're working to combat some celebrity-driven misinformation involving Nicki Minaj. And you asked Jen Psaki about that earlier. Let's play some of that exchange.
There seems to be a difference of opinion between Nicki Minaj and the White House about what she was invited to do. Did the White House extend an invitation to Nicki Minaj to come here?
Well, first, we don't see this as a point of tension or disagreement. I want you all to know that we engage all the time with people who have big public platforms or profiles. Some of them we talk about, some of them are here, some of them you don't even know about because they're just looking for questions to be answered. We offered a call with Nicki Minaj and one of our doctors to answer questions she had about the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine. This is pretty standard and something we do all the time. It was a very early stage call at a staff level, staff to staff, and we weren't even at the point of discussing, or we're not even at the point of discussing, I should say at this point, the mechanisms or the format or anything along those lines. It was simply an offer to have a conversation and an early stage call.
All right, so Nancy, for the record, I checked with my producers and they told me that you would be delighted to give us the background on this situation. So what is the backstory here and what role does the White House see celebrities having when it comes to speaking about public health issues like vaccines?
I am steeped in the Nicki Minaj controversy at this point, Elaine, and happy to provide all of the details. So it all started on Monday afternoon when the super bass singer tweeted that her cousin's friend in Trinidad had gotten the COVID vaccine and was now impotent. And she said that people should pray on it before they themselves decide to get the vaccine. She is unvaccinated herself at this point, but says she'll probably do it in the future. Well, this prompted an outcry on social media from people who said she was promoting misinformation. The health minister in Trinidad and Tobago came out the next day, said there was absolutely no evidence that anyone had a side effect of this kind in the island nation. And the White House reached out to Nicki Minaj's team to sort of offer a one-on-one phone conversation with the star about the vaccine because, you know, she has a massive platform. She has 23 million followers on Twitter. She's one of the biggest selling female artists of all time, and they don't want her giving the vaccine a bad rap, if you will. But what she then said was that she had been invited to actually come here to the White House to meet with the president's chief medical advisor, Anthony Fauci. So what you saw there was the White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, trying in as kind of a way as possible, because she doesn't want to get into a feud with this big star, to say, well, we've reached out to her to try to set up a phone call with our doctors to give her the correct information. But at this point, there is no sign that an actual meeting here at the White House is going to take place.
All right, we know you will stay on top of that story for us, Nancy. Thank you. So, Sarah, on the pandemic, we mentioned the FDA report raising questions about the need for booster shots. Will this impact the White House's rollout plan?
That's a great question. You know, the White House has caused some confusion around the necessity for vaccine boosters for COVID-19, whether or not they're needed, when they're needed. And this began, of course, when the president announced publicly, under the advice of top doctors at HHS, that some Americans should be prepared as early as September 20th to receive the vaccine booster shot. But the important caveat here is that they stressed then and continue to stress now that this was all pending that FDA and ACIP approval. So the panel, as you mentioned, meets tomorrow. The ACIP will meet next for 2 days to discuss whether or not it's needed. The White House doesn't know what they're going to say, but again, as you mentioned, some documents have come out from the FDA that express a little bit of skepticism. So the White House's defense here for those public announcements is that they were saying they were preparing for the possibility of the vaccine booster being needed. They didn't want to be caught off guard. They wanted to have that arsenal ready, and the beginning of that public education campaign sort of already on the go as well. So the bottom line is that we'll get more clarity about all of this after the FDA meets tomorrow, and then after the ACIP meetings take place next week.
All right. Well, booster shots, federal spending, and Nicki Minaj. We cover it all here on Red and Blue for you. Nancy Cordes, Sarah Mucha, and Rhonda Colvin, thank you all very much.